trillions of billions, trillions of tokens of data. So there's all this. So anything that's been published, all that information gets put in to learn the patterns of language. Now, before I showed you the M's, the M I call the parameter, right? That's what the model is trying to understand and learn. And I'll talk a little bit about those parameters. The same thing happens. And when you hear about a large language model having billions of hyperparameters, that is what that is. It's learning what those parameters are to be able to predict OLAP. So here's another fun little tidbit, right? When you run a language model, you generate embeddings. And embeddings is essentially taking a word or a phrase and turning it into a vector, which is really just a list of numbers. So it has a list of numbers, which is, let's just call it like the parameters. It's a weight. How much weight do I put on this particular characteristic? And so that's what allows two numbers just to identify how close are these embeddings. So that's a semantic similarity to infer meaning. So let's look at this example that I have here on the bottom. I have a man and a woman, and I have a queen and a king. So as you can imagine, if I'm looking at a chart and I say, if I look at those words, the words king and queen might be quite close to each other on one scale. If I'm talking about royalty versus commoner, king and queen are going to be up here. But on another scale, male and female for a king and queen would be on a different scale at a different location. So you can start to map those, which then allows you to actually do math. Or if I take man minus woman plus queen, will most likely give you the answer king. And you basically turn natural language into math. So maybe that's more than you want to know, but I geek out on this stuff. Okay, so LLMs, surprise, surprise, they've been around since 1967, or at least the concept and the plan of what an LLM can be. Where most of us became really aware of LLMs is the very recent release in 2022 of ChatGPT. I started working in LLMs in 2016 before we had transformers. And we used more of a rules-based and a natural language processing before that. Then we have the first real transformer model that was used, in the market is BERT by Google and Stanford. But anyways, tons of development, and the explosion in 2023 is insane. And I'll go through some of the things that are in the market right now. And I'm going to share these links later because this is too small for you to follow. But when I talk about models, there are now tracking of all the different models that are available. Hugging Face does a great job of making these models and these open source models available. And they also evaluate them and look at them in basic on size, and they look at a leaderboard and accuracy on different structures, so that you could go in and say, all right, I want to look for an LLM. Another one that I like a lot is Life Architect. So Life Architect, I really should remember his name, but he's just doing an amazing job of grabbing all that's going on in the large language space. If you look at these numbers, these are the parameters. So again, right here, if you can see parameters, and maybe you can't see it on your screen, but it's like 2 trillion parameters. Again, we're going from a line y equals mx plus b, solving for y. This is 2 trillion. That's a lot of compute power, and many of these companies have spent in the billions to create these models. All right, so now let's bring it to our level, okay? Like our acting. What do we do? So we're going to talk about an AI assistant that uses a large language model. Now, we know there's been chatbots, right? Those chatbots have been around for a while. And a lot of them are more decision tree, and they give you, here's a couple of choices, here, click on this button, you go. With the large language models, you can be much more open and free. So in the most basic case, a user will go in and write a question. How much does a dog weigh? And the large language model will produce an answer. Now, in large language model speak, that's a prompt and a completion. So this is called zero-shot learning. I'm not giving it any examples. I'm not telling it anything. I'm just saying, what's a question, or write this article for me. And so that's kind of the most basic. So you can go out and try all kinds of questions and begin to test out an idea. I wonder if I could do this. I wonder if a large language model can help me do this. And a lot of people are doing this and coming up with new business ideas, new product ideas, just at this level of prompting. So I can go one step deeper. Besides just asking a question or say using this, and you've probably already tried this already, you can provide a system prompt and an agent prompt or a user prompt. And you could even give an example. I like this article, write an article like this as an example. And the LLM will produce a completion. Now, this is called few-shot learning. It's a little more complex, and you have to think. In fact, there are whole careers that have spun up purely in prompt engineering. There are new jobs, and you don't have to be a computer scientist. Frankly, you have to understand language and understand usually be a subject matter expert to understand, like, oh, I really understand marketing, or I really understand plastic polymer recycling. So I can use that information to help get the information that I want out of the large language. Or you can go deeper, where you have your user prompt with all the other methods you can use before, and you get a completion. But this time you say, well, I've got my professor's textbook, and I want to just be able to just type in a question and get the answer from that textbook, not just because I need something really specific. Or I can have legal documents or contracts. I need to know what's in those contracts. So you can create a data set or files that you ingest into the model. You run an embedding model. So you put numbers on every word and every phrase and every page. And now you're actually running a proprietary large language model chatbot. So now it's yours. It's your pieces of information. If it sits behind the firewall in your company, you might use it just for your accounting department. You might use it for your compliance team, or your policies, or HR manual. There are a lot of different use cases that I've seen. You can use it for FAQs. So now you have all this technical information about your documents. You put those there, and you can generate answers for people using that information. We've looked at use cases where you actually generate a knowledge base based upon a transcript of a call, one call or multiple calls with a technical support agent. So now you take those calls and you generate this data set of information that now you have a knowledge base to answer those questions. Lots of amazing things. So that uses a RAG model. RAG is an abbreviation, and people are making up all kinds of words: RAG, Raga, Ragas, Llama, Llama2, Alpaca, all for language models. They're just running out of names. It's going to get a little bit crazy soon. But RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So it's retrieving, it's augmenting the generation with a retrieval. And finally, you can move to fine-tuning. So a user prompt, but you give it hundreds of examples, if not thousands of examples, of how you want it to respond. So now it's learning. Oh, when you say this, you want that as the output. So you can help, and that will drive style and a lot of other factors in it. So fine-tuning is really about where most of us get to. If we want to train your own model, train a large language model, as I said, the models that you're working with, maybe that's Claude or ChatGPT, those have costed billions of dollars to develop. So I haven't done those. I stay with these methods. And as you get more complex and you think about it, this is some scratch paper. Literally, I was going through planning out a different method of getting some better answers and plugging in certain pieces here of vector stores and RAG and which LLM I would use at different times and how I might do that. And we call this an ensemble model because it may use 5 or 6 different models or methods to be able to get to that. And there are also some great tools that are becoming available. I work closely with DataWorks, and they have a RAG tool, so a retrieval augmented generation for pre-processing data and taking that data and then running it through transformations. So it's very much quicker to be able to build out your RAG models and to be able to quickly get to question and answers. So DataWorks is doing some great things there, and we've had a very close partnership with them. So now I'm going to come back to product development. Now, this is one example of one suggestion of how I've done this in the past. While you may have a grand vision of what a completely automated bot could do for you, my suggestion is start small. Start with a proof of concept. And there may be more complications. It may take you 2 years to get that just right. And I'd hate to have you waste the time and money to say, this doesn't quite do what I was looking for it to do, or it has this limitation. And I'll talk about some of those. But so start with a proof of concept. And I've even put together one of the teams that we put together as this is growing, like 6 weeks, boom, let's get something out. Let's interact with that. Okay, that makes sense. Then let's move to an MVP. Now, I have a different definition than most people of MVP. Most people say minimum viable product. I say look for the minimum valuable. So it has to produce value. The result at this stage, in my opinion, has to produce some value. Even if you went nowhere further, if you just did that, maybe it's just one little piece, but it's useful and valuable. And then move to beta and public release. So you move through these chunks and you're iterating and learning and getting it better and solving problems all along. All right, so I said I was going to share some of the FAQs. So these are the frequently asked questions that people have on their mind. How do I stop hallucinations? What's the best LLM? What should I use? And how do I future-proof my AI? Now, I ran a little quiz on LinkedIn, and some of you may have gotten to this, but I pulled this up before. And I only gave it a four choices, but response accuracy, which is that hallucinations, is one of the top concerns. Cost of developing and wasting money, and this is why I say do these chunks, build it up incrementally, and less concern on the other ones. So we're going to talk through these fairly quickly. Hallucination. So most of you are familiar that when you produce a question, an LLM like ChatGPT or Claude will produce an answer. It'll produce an answer every time. And sometimes it'll sound totally great, and then it'll just go off the rails. What you've also heard hallucinations say that these LLMs will lie convincingly. And I try to think about it a little nicer. What they're doing is they're calculating in their mind, in this machine mind, right? Saying, what's the highest probability? What is Zion expecting? When I ask, how do you say hello in Spanish? What do I think Zion's expecting? And what I do is, again, I'm the LLM. As an LLM, I say, well, here's the highest probability This is my best guess. Now, I don't know exactly because maybe I didn't understand this question, but I say hola, right? So when an LLM is hallucinating or making stuff up, what it's really doing is giving you the probability of the best choice of words that you're going to believe and like as an answer. That's why they lie convincingly. And you'll look at an answer, and you'll read it, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. In one example that I ran, I was looking at the population of states or cities within a state. And like the first 5 numbers were dead on. And I looked them up, like, oh, wow, how can it know all of this? But then you get down to some other ones, and it had a number that looked about right. Like, oh, it was population of 2025. And I knew it was a smaller town, but that number was dead wrong. So it lies convincingly. It knows how to present the information, but it only knows the probabilities. There are other things that help you stop, that stop this. Temperature is a setting in large language models that have to do with how generative, how creative it gets. And so you can adjust that temperature down so that it stays more accurate. It will not be as creative, and it will hallucinate less. RAG models, as I've talked about, is a great way where many people are going and saying, I'm going to implement a RAG model to improve and reduce my hallucinations. So choosing an LLM, I need a shout out to Claudacio. I did a webinar with Juan Pablo Oliveira of Claudacio about spinning up an open source Llama 2 LLM on a server on AWS. And so this comes from him. And so a few little things I just want to identify that GPT 3.5 is the underlying model for some of ChatGPT. GPT-4 is another underlying model. These are API endpoints that have a price. So every time you hit it, you pay for the number of tokens. Let's just use that for the number of words as an approximation. But one of the things, again, to pay attention to, look at these number of parameters on these models. 175 billion, 1.76 trillion, Palm, 340 billion. So those you pay on a token basis. But if you look at this free, you're thinking, what the heck? How is this free? Llama 2. Well, Meta developed Llama 2, and they made this open source. So you can download Llama 2 and run it on a computer. You can get a smaller version, a 7 billion, a 13, or 70 billion. So there's a lot of choices, and it depends on your use case. So I'll leave that at this point, but there's a lot of options and more growing every day. Future proofing. This feels like everything, everywhere, all at once. There is so much development. This changes every week. I'll be on a call with somebody we're working on developing a product for, and they'll say, have you looked at this, or have you done that? And 5 times out of 10, I haven't seen that yet because it just came out last week. So future proofing is, we don't know what the future is going to be like. They're going to be more and more valuable. But I'll tell you this, if you think through the process of what you want to accomplish, you are the subject matter expert. ChatGPT is not a subject matter expert. It might seem like it because it can produce a proposal or it can do this, but you're the subject matter expert. And when you have your specific data, that proprietary data is unique to you in the way you use it. By doing that and going through the groundwork, that piece of it is future-proof, how you're going to use it. You can switch out models. A new model can come out. That data and the way you're interacting is still important. So, okay, finally, tools for you. So I don't have all of this put together and ready, so that's why I've got my QR code. And I've got this presentation and the links that I've referred to, like Life Architect and Hugging Face Leaderboard. Those will be available. And if you want one or two of these things, I also have a chat checklist or a chat bot. What are the questions, if you want to build something, what are the questions that you need to answer, things to consider to create a requirements document, right? How is this going to perform? What do I want it to do? As well as an AI strategy document. And this is just, it's a tool that I've used to help people prioritize their AI projects and create an AI roadmap. They aren't really big, complex, but I think I have found these very helpful. So you can hit me up on LinkedIn. This QR code will get you to that, and I'd be happy to share those with you. Just drop your email in there, and I'll send you whatever you'd like. And that's it. I went a little bit over, Zion, but this is fun stuff. I get a little crazy sometimes and get excited. So I hope that helps.
Thank you very
much. Happy
to
take on any questions.
Yes. I would like to say that we are progressing to the next stage, and that's the Q&A. So please, if you have any questions, you could drop them on the chat. And then if there is, time, permits us, we'll take, a few live questions as well. Jason is constrained on time, as we all are, but Jason, thank you very much. If this were a physical meeting, what we should be doing was to give you a round of applause, right? But it's all good, and thank you very much. I'll just, while we wait for the questions, I have one question there already, and while we wait for more, and then I'll just probably ask a few questions. Yeah, so I'm not an AI engineer like you are. So I'm going to pull you out a little bit from the engineering side and, into the, I would say, the business or the, the product development side. I hope you don't mind, because at the end of the day, if you build the best engines, you still want to make money, right? And so, the first question I'll just quickly ask is, and this is just about developing products. It probably will also be related to AI products as well. So, and in an ideal situation, like we've been taught and we do, you want to create a new product or you're developing a new product, either it's in your mind or in an idea just came up and the rest, you do your market analysis, you understand, if there are competitors, you go in, gather up all this data and all of that, you do all this groundwork, to ensure that what you want to develop is actually the right product, is right for the market, is right for the customers and the users. It could be just any product, or it could be an AI product. Now with language models that have amassed so much of this data that ideally you would have to go out there to go research people and maybe have surveys or run through SEMrush on the computer website and the rest of that. Now you have these language models that have amassed all this data. What can change? What can be done better than those previous activities? What kind of prompts, or how do you feed into this? I believe like the Chat GPT, which is the common example, has all this data, it has gotten them. How can a typical maybe business analyst make that life easier and get all that right there sitting down on the system, rather than going outside in the market and doing all the footwork?
Well, that's a hard one for me to answer. I think the question there is, can I leverage? I'll use ChatGPT as a.
Can you leverage? Yes, exactly.
It's an LLM is anything, but I'll just use ChatGPT. Can I leverage ChatGPT? In my product development and the product ideas. Absolutely. But I will say that nothing is better than a human responding to your idea. You have to be able to present that idea and get that feedback. It'll definitely help you structure and organize and follow the steps. But I used to teach a course in Lean Startup. If you're familiar with the Lean Startup methodology, It is all about iterating on your product. Get it in front of customers. Give it in front of a potential user. So there's nothing more important than that. And I don't know that a large language model is going to bypass that step. But in terms of designing and planning, and if you are doing a language model product, you can rapid prototype with just using the sandbox or the playground and at OpenAI and test a lot of things. I have a lot of people that'll come to me and say, I've gotten it this far. If I do this, I get this. And people are writing books, people are doing management consulting and marketing consulting, but then at some point they need to expand. So I think in a lot of products, it helps you prototype and rapid prototype. So a lot of good opportunities there.
Okay, thank you. I'll just drop 2 more questions, then I'll go to the audience. Again, these are questions I gather all around. Again, so if I'll say AI has existed for a while. Yes, and you mentioned that as well. It wasn't just probably called AI, or in some form, it was maybe machine learning and the rest of that. Now, what you have today is, because of the popularity of ChatGPT, a lot of products coming out, and this time around, it's more like you're selling AI and not the product. Oh, this is an AI-based this is an AI-based that, and the rest of that. What do you, you are in the business environment as well. You work with companies, you help develop AI. Do you think it's I probably have a school of thoughts that says you sell your products rather than selling AI. Now, in your experience in the market, what do you think is actually resonating? And then what's your take on that? That you should sell your product. For instance, Gmail spam filter. In a way, it's AI. Probably not being sold as AI in the sense that it checks, other emails, other users' interaction with a particular email or an IP and the rest of that, and then it categorizes if this email is a spam, if it's a promotional email and things like that, and the rest of that. So there's been AI embedded, but they don't say it's AI. It's just a spam filter. But someone could come in and say, oh, this is an AI-based spam filter. It's still the same thing.
Well, it's very, I'll jump in here. It's very stylish to say it's AI, right? It is very much so. But let's go back to the basics, and I believe my AI strategy document goes in this approach. It's not a product. It's not AI. It's either a problem that you're solving or an opportunity that some improvement you're offering. That is what you sell. I'm selling. If I have a product, doesn't matter what it is, I'm selling you a solution. That is what your product is. Whether it has AI or not, well, maybe it doesn't need it. I gave you the story of when I started building the first AI product. There was no AI because it uses natural language processing, but nothing like it can do now. So because I had to solve the problem. So I think you have to really think about the problem first, and AI may not be the way to go for it. Look for the simplest and cheapest way to do it, and then you can graduate and go from there. So, and then some things are 90% of the solution is AI centric. Well, it makes all the sense in the world. Again, there's marketing. Marketers should do whatever will sell their product, with truth, right? My marketing director, my chief marketing officer says, well, I just tell the truth in the future. It's coming. All right, let's go to another question.
Okay, just my own last question here again. And that is, I'll take you back to your poll. You listed 4 options. You dropped out 2 because no, they had a least response. I assume that those who answered this question were the technical guys who gave questions that based on the response accuracy and then the cost, But actually, before you get to that stage where you're talking about the cost, and when you're talking about the performance of the LLM, you first need to figure out how do you even integrate AI into what you're doing. And again, that's a question that I hear most of the time. The question businesses, because it's the buzz. How do we embed AI so that we probably have maybe this existing product and we're saying it's an AI product, or AI is embedded in it, so it appeals to people and the rest of that. So if we don't, if as a typical business, we don't take care of that, we can't even get to the stage of saying how much is it going to cost us, and then what's the performance. So my question, here is, for a typical product business, maybe in finance, maybe in accounting, maybe in med tech, or the rest of that, how do they get started? And they're interested. Look, we want to be along on the train, the AI train. We want it. We just want to have something different from chatbot on your website where you attend to customers. You want an AI embedded or driven or integrated product. How do you even get started? One, you don't even have the team. It was also on one of the response. You don't have a team because your current team are just engineers who build the product. You probably don't have that much exposure. Do you go out to get an AI, or do you consult someone like you? How does the journey start? That's my question.
Yeah. So it first starts with a question of, what are my pain points in the business? Like, it's not about AI. It's not about even technology. It's like, what are the things that are a problem? Or it could be an operational. Man, I spend a lot of time doing XYZ and it seems like a waste of our talent. Is there some way to automate that? That automation may not require any AI at all or any machine learning, but that's a pain point. So in the AI strategy and prioritization, I go through a set of questions there that I think could be helpful in this, where you say, you just start with, what's my pain point? What is my customer pain point? What is that I'm trying to solve? Because if it's not a pain point, it could be, I'm not making enough money for the effort being made. So what are my opportunities to create and build something? I think it always starts there. It's not a technology chasing a product or a problem. It's a problem finding the right technology. So if you start out with saying, I'm going to solve this with AI, or I want to find an AI product, that's not the way to start. Start with the problems, because then you look at those, you find that to which you can create value. How do you get started? You don't always know the answer. Now, that's why for some companies larger, they have an R&D budget. But it's the other thing where I said, I'll often get on a call with somebody who wants to build an AI product. And again, like I said, they'll have a big plan. And I'll say, of all those little things that it's doing, what's the most useful? Like what could be, like, just give me, like, what's the thing that bothers you? Okay, let's just do that. There may be 10 other things to do. Let's just do that and build a prototype. Spend no more than a few weeks doing that and say, and then let's respond. At the end of that 6 weeks, you are going to know so much more than you did before you started. Now you can make a decision on the next step. Do I go a step further, or do I change my mind? Lots of different things to consider. So that's, I like to break it down to steps and go with the minimum valuable product. That's what you're going for, something that produces value.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll pick up the questions that we have here. So once we answer these few questions, if we still have time, then you could signify by the emoji raising up of the hand, and then we could take a live question as well. So the first question I have here, it
Yeah,
says,
go ahead.
can I go ahead? Yeah, okay. How do you constrain a chatbot so that, for example, it sticks to facts and it does not suddenly offer a 95% discount on purchases?
Awesome. Great question. And a question that is asked over and over again. Like, this is a key question. It's that was one of the highest priorities on my LinkedIn poll. So there are methods, right? In your prompt engineering, as I said, there are prompt engineers. I have a person on my team that all she does all day long is dream up and test new prompts. And a prompt is, it's instructions. So again, one of these, in one approach, as I went through that list of complexity, the easiest one is to tell it not to say, verify and validate that this is acceptable. So you can actually give it instructions what not to do and what to do. If you're using an API, you can set the temperature. So if you have some document that it's using in context, or if you have some context, then you can set the temperature to control the creativity, and it's going off. So it stops it from going off the rails, and it's much more restrictive. Again, then you can use a RAG model if it's worth the effort and the development cost, or fine tuning. So you can go through all these steps, and there are now authentication and validation methods called ragas, which we've employed and have tested with some pretty good results. And this is new tech where it actually goes back and it'll give you a probability of an accurate and a correct response. It's like having somebody evaluate it and QA the results. So there's a number of different methods. You'll make improvements. All right.
Wonderful. The next question here is, what infrastructure do you need to run your own solution using an LLM?
Your own. Okay, so there's a number of choices here. You can run an LLM. Let me make a distinction. There is using an LLM like via an API endpoint. So your infrastructure there is you're actually hitting an API. So we write most of our programs in Python, and then we'll deploy that code on an EC2 instance on AWS. So that can all be done in the cloud, and it could be relatively small because the model is actually sits over at OpenAI. Now, if I talked about Llama 2, which is where you can own and run your own model. Now, it's an open source library, but you can then fine tune it and make it yours. You can even tweak the hyperparameters and make adjustments. You can run that on a laptop. There are laptops that don't necessarily require GPUs, and at a 7 billion parameter model, you can run that on your laptop. With Cloudasio, we spun that Llama 2 model up on I can't remember what instance. So you can reserve an instance on the cloud. So you can do it on the cloud, or you can do it on your desktop.
Great. If I could piggyback on that question, if you're saying you can run Llama, which is the open source version, on an EC2 instance. Is that it?
Yes. Yeah. So you can run that on an EC2. Sorry, I was turning off the transcriptions. I was getting some captions. So yeah, so you can run it on a desktop. You can run it at some point. The larger models, it's not feasible. 70 billion will probably push it, and the processing speed, processing time, those factors will have an impact. So most people will run it on AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud.
Okay. Yeah. And so the next question here says, could you share the list of AIs and what they are good with? I think you mentioned that in one of your slides. Maybe if you could just mention it again.
Let's see. Let's see. Is it this question by Ryan G? Oh no, here it is. Could you share with me the list of AIs and what are they good with? So there are, and when you say AI, I'm gonna assume you're talking about some of these generative pre-trained models. So GPT, generative pre-trained transformer. So those are the LLMs. It's also the image generation. So DALL-E by OpenAI is an image generation model. We have Stable Diffusion, which is also an image and video generation. And there's another one I've lost off the top of my head. So those have different. So there's image generation, and ultimately these are foundational models. I will tell you that in our experience, that GPT-4 is really good, and we compare it against, and it's been compared against, and it still feels like it has the lead. Now, for a general purpose use, there are models. It's Falcon, that is it's a language model in the medical industry. I believe over time, what will happen is we'll have a number of different models with special capabilities in particular areas and industries and segments. So that will be changing. That's why I'm going to share with you both the Hugging Face and the Life Architect, because that's where you need to look to. I'll say we will typically start on a GPT 3.5, GPT-4, but we will use BERT, one of the oldest transformer models. We'll still use that for one task. It might be one task like summarize this text or extract keywords or do a entity extraction analysis, because we can load that onto a server and be relatively low cost. I don't have to hit API endpoints, and it does a great job. So I'll compare it against gold standard, say, this is good for the purposes. So we'll often use 3 or 4 different models when we build something.
Thank you. The next question here said you had a slide that evaluated LLMs, and that was ChatGPT, Llama 2, and rest. The parameters versus cost, seeing your key considerations. And then it's asking, did you consider anything else? What else do you recommend be taken into consideration when selecting one? Out of those list of
yes, and then a
LLMs.
follow-up on the effectiveness. In the end, those numbers may not matter in terms of how much something costs. Depends on the use case, right? So every product has a different use case, and a 1 percentage point improvement in effectiveness is worth the money. So the other factors that come into play is you have a fixed cost, right? With, let's say, a hosted, your own model that you're running. When I say your own, again, it's generally an open source model that you're adapting for your particular use case. You can, the other factor is security and compliance. Perhaps I'm in a GDPR country, and in that environment, you might have sensitive data. So that's a reason to say, I'm not going to use any API endpoint. I'm not going to send anything outside of my controlled network. So there's privacy and security considerations that you could take into account. Again, the effectiveness, let's just say, is it accurate? Do the language, which are often qualitative measures, which depend on your specific use case. I don't know. I haven't built on Falcon. It hasn't been released yet, but who knows? Maybe it was done this morning and I'm wrong. But Falcon is coming out with a, with a medical, and so I would compare those two. I'd mentioned that some of the tools that we use that can allow you to switch from using Llama 2 to GPT-4. All I do is just change a toggle. Try it. I can even compare those results. some of it's qualitative. So that's really when you go dig deeper. And a lot of times I start with what I think is the best, even if it's more expensive. And then if it's giving me the results and it's good, then I'll stick with that. If I'm having problems, then we'll look at a different model. But then after I get it working, then we'll say, do I have alternatives to optimize? I rarely try to optimize my cost function in a prototype, in a MVP or beta. Before I get to production, that's when you start thinking about, okay, what are the cost effectiveness trade-offs? So I'll try to start with the best and then get more careful as we roll it out and scale it.
Okay, thank you very much. You've already answered the question which I missed, which was how do you evaluate the effectiveness of the LLMs after selection? You've already answered that. This question here says, ChatGPT is a hot topic of 2023. Is there any success stories / case studies of LLM that you particularly like? So basically asking with your interactions.
Yeah, so I have a number of use cases that I've been closely involved with, so it's easier for me to talk to those. In one case, we had a video script generation, and for this particular client, they had this whole video production, and the writing the script, the words, and staying right on brand, getting just the right words was very important. And it's not easy. So it takes time to hire a writer. It takes time to write. It takes time to go through the process. So this was a use case that was fun to work on. It was a challenge. This is prior to ChatGPT and GPT 3.5. And fine tuning that model with examples. And it took a lot of data scrubbing to get the right fine tuning into that model. But now it's in use for generating these scripts. In this case, and this is one thing I need to make sure I talk about, this human in the loop concept. I suggest that anytime you're building an LLM, anytime you're building an AI product, you are considering a few things. One, how will a human interact with it? And two, that you have this thought of how to build that and plan that so that a human can both evaluate as well as participate in it as a partner. So I think it's super important to think about the human in the loop in every process, to consider those aspects. I don't know if I answered that completely, but that'll anyways, that's one good example. I could go on and on. So we got quite a few questions, so let's go.
Yes, I think Ryan has a question. We can take, how many live questions can we take, Jesse? I'll let you decide that.
Well, as long as we have questions I can answer. If I can't answer the questions, then it's all over.
Okay. So if
but I might be like ChatGPT and I make something up. I might start hallucinating.
So if you have any live questions, yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about, I'm seeing a couple of things as well. Just, some people have had comments of AWS released Bedrock, Replicate. Thanks, Nick. There are a number of these tools that are coming up to help you compare and rapid deploy. I know Copilot is coming out from Azure. So you're going to see more and more. So what will happen is you'll be able to rapid prototype more quickly and then decide, now does it make sense for me to customize this a little bit more? You saw my diagram that would looked like my scratch paper. It's because it gets much more complex as you're thinking through, I've got to solve this problem and do that. So we are always looking at that. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, any questions? I'm happy to take them.
Okay. We just wait for about 1 minute if there's any live
I want
questions.
a question from Obi-Wan Kenobi. You should know the answer before I even ask the question. I don't know who Obi-Wan Kenobi is, but I guess you wouldn't ask me the question because you already know the answer, or you're saying You're not the
I
drones. You're
think he dropped a question here.
oh, did I jump one?
He's saying, I know Obi-Wan Kenobi actually is asking a question, and he's saying, I'm looking for a LLM allowing me to run on my PC and generate specific type of the black and white graphic based on the specific criteria. Which LLM
So
would you recommend?
my suggestion now you're talking about generate a black and white graphic. So I'm talking about image generation. My suggestion is Stable
Yes.
Diffusion. It's a little bit big, but I know you can run it on a PC. You might look at the requirements, but we have run Stable Diffusion on a PC, and it's again it does pretty good at those, and you can give it a lot of instructions. So I would say look at that first.
Okay.
We'll get the
Yeah.
slides. So if you just reach out to me, or I'll work with Zion to get those. I'll get those out or make those available
Yes.
for those. Probably best to kind of reach out to me.
Yes.
So you've got if you need me to put up my QR code, or Zion will
Yes, you probably can do that. Yes, you can do that so that for those who missed it earlier, they could they can just scan. And also Jason is very much available on LinkedIn as well. You can reach out to him there. If I could ask a quick question, as you know, one of the fears of AI is a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, but then again, I think the roles will simply change. So while we prepare ourselves for the age of working alongside with machines and robots in the future, what roles are available now, and what roles do you think will be opening up in the future? In the next 10 years, where it becomes even more scary, actually. Maybe younger ones could start prepare, or maybe I can tell my kid right now, this is the career I think you should pursue, because in the next 10 years, this career or whatever you have now is going to be redundant. Or for universities, for instance, those in the academia, what courses should we be teaching in preparing ourselves for in the future? It's going to change.
Yeah. So here's what I'd say. And I like this question. AI will require you to change, and for many of us. And what happens is you have to do what makes you human, and you have to keep evolving, because you'll see a task, and the reason some company wants to automate some function is because it's done over and over again. And when something is outsourced, it's outsourced because somebody can just do this repetitive function. So what happens is you have a human doing that, and they really aren't using what makes them uniquely human. And we're going to see this in legal. We're going to see this in financial. We're going to see this in programming. And some of the things that we do uniquely that really a large language model, given it's a probability model, isn't a problem solver. And I find that those people, we're seeing a lot of marketing content being generated by AI. My wife runs the marketing department for a company, and she's particularly strong in the content generation. And she still spends quite a bit of time. She uses large language models to help her assist all the time. But now it's the thinking part that she spends her time. And you have to know how you want to structure it. You have to know what instructions. It's like hiring a new employee and say, go do this. And they're going to produce something, but it might not really meet what your needs are because they don't have your experience. So I would say, always pay attention to how to be human, right? If you're doing something that is not adding value, well, that piece of your job is probably at risk. So, and And I would say, and I'd come back to the thing that makes us most human is more than computer programming or AI. It's problem solving. It's critical thinking, evaluation, creative thinking. I think those are the things, right, that really help us understand and really be a collaborator with AI. So that's why I call it's as an AI assistant. I like to think of it as an AI assistant because the AI assistant can help you create something. It can help you give you information. It can help you organize, but it's really working for you. That's my view. I'm not too worried about the doomsday scenario. Mostly because I have to keep learning, and I like learning. So as long as you like to learn and you're willing to do it, then you're gonna love it. It'll be a great ride.
I guess the stakes just got higher, which is also very good. Yeah. Thank you very much. I don't think there's any more questions. I mean, the floor is open. I'll say, Jason, thank you so much. And personally, I'm very grateful. And I believe many of us here, all of us here, we've learned so much from your wealth of experience. And I believe we'll still have, more narrow session, not narrow AI, but narrow session where we deep dive into, maybe a specific function, like the area where you talked about running your own data, but the LLM running on your own data. I think it's an aspect that a lot of people, especially in the corporate world, will be very interested in. I mean, some companies have stopped the use of OpenAI because company employees just feed in data and just like that. But for privacy, and also that you mentioned GDPR and the rest of that. So I think these are topics that would probably go deep dive in. Thank you very much. I'm going to launch a quick poll for all of us. It's just to have our feedback on how the session went and how it's I mean, what's your feedback and what do you think, how can we improve and the rest of that. And again, thank you everyone. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Obi-Wan Kenobi, I believe is the real one. Nick, Jack, Zaid, Miku. Please pardon me if I misspell your name. I'm not an LLM that could get the best guess. I'm trying as well. Patera, Deborah, David, Atem, Joe, and all of you all. Thank you, really, and thank you, and have a wonderful night and a very nice session. And great, Joe, we can see you, and wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
And Jason,
thank you, Zion.
so much.
Good to see you, Joe.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. So
Awesome.
have a nice night and wonderful all. Thank you, Jason. We're very, very grateful. All right. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Pleasure, everyone. Thank you.